Hi, I'm Old Norse specialist Dr Crawford. I'm leaving out a part of that intro that's become so automatic for me in the past few years. And the part that I'm leaving out, since recording videos in about December 2020, is Dr. Jackson Crawford. And that's because I've been reevaluating my own relationship with the title doctor and my own use of that title since I became aware in about December 2020 with a lot of news stories and opinion things about this title. I've been reevaluating in awareness of how apparently pretentious it seems to many people when someone who holds a doctorate that's not a medical doctor, right? Someone with a Ph.D. like me, or maybe an Ed.D. or a theological doctorate or a juris doctorate, whatever. How pretentious it apparently seems when people like us use doctor in ways that I hadn't really evaluated. What I want to share with you in this video is my own history with that title as someone who holds a PhD and works in ways that that title and qualification comes up, and how I've been reevaluating it in these last several weeks. All right, well, as a very young man, going back to probably, the mid-90s when I might not have even been double digits of age yet, I had a kind of fond desire to one day be Dr. Crawford. And I know exactly where it comes from. It comes from Dr. Jones, right? I, like a lot of young people who kind of idolized the study of the past, I idolized the fictional personage of Indiana Jones, although probably not as much as some other people. For example, I never even saw Indiana Jones at the Temple of Doom. My idolization was based on Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade. And I just thought it was so cool that you could know so much about the past that you weren't even Mr. Jones or Mr. Crawford anymore. You were Dr. Jones or Dr. Crawford, right? That just seemed cool to me and was a fairly innocent desire, void of any status things, because, I didn't have any notion that holding a PhD made you better than anyone else around you. No one around me had a PhD. And to imagine that having one would make me better than, say, my grandfather was pretty absurd. But it seemed cool. And, back in those days, I wanted to study paleontology, still feel related to the past. But what I eventually got my PhD in was Scandinavian studies with a focus on philology. In other words, Old language and literature. And the Scandinavian field, that means Old Norse language and literature. And I can remember after I got my PhD, the first couple months are kind of heady, right? You're signing all your checks, Dr. Jackson Crawford, you're signing everything, doctor this, doctor that. You're kind of, sheepishly, but in good fun, reminding people that that's Dr. Crawford now, right? Not Mr. Crawford. And all that is in kind of good fun, but eventually you get over it. And for me, there was a big getting over it, because I actually taught at UCLA as a faculty member for 3 years without my PhD. I was hired to teach at UCLA ABD, all but dissertation, so I'd completed all my PhD coursework, but I hadn't finished my dissertation yet. Nonetheless, I taught a full load, more than a full load of classes at the undergraduate and occasionally graduate level at UCLA. So it was a big deal to me. Originally I thought to be able to say, hey, you can't call me Professor Crawford because who of my generation has that title? I'll get back to that in a minute. But you can call me Dr. Crawford now, and I thought that was pretty great. But the real kind of come to earth moment was that I actually, my job at UCLA ceased to exist. The announcement came within days of me actually getting my PhD from the University of Wisconsin. I'd flown back there during UCLA spring break to defend my dissertation, and complete my Ph.D. So all of a sudden, you know, I have a Ph.D. in something that, you know, nobody knows what it is. And I applied to 800 jobs in the next couple months. You know, I was going to have my last paycheck from UCLA, I think, June 30th of that year, June 30th, 2014. And so I had to find some kind of work. I don't have family I can fall back on. You know, nobody's going to pay my bills if I'm not working. So I wound up working at a small museum in Wyoming that had nothing to do with my particular academic focus, right? A small local museum, a part of the world that I love. The job itself was actually not particularly academic. It was a lot of clerk and janitor stuff. But of course, you know, I'm still a little bit heady coming off getting my PhD. And I didn't feel like it was too much to ask working at a museum and being in some ways entrusted with the care of the past of a place to be called Dr. Crawford. But people definitely thought that it was, you know, a little weird and a little pretentious, even in the context of that job. So I stopped expecting it. And of course, I never expected it in non-teaching or expertise-related contexts, right? If I met you at a barbecue, I would not introduce myself as Dr. Jackson Crawford. I would introduce myself as Jackson, because how pretentious does it sound, you know, between bites of ribs to be like, yeah, Dr. Jackson Crawford. Even medical doctors, I don't think, introduce themselves that way. And, you know, gradually I kind of let go of the doctor thing at all. I stopped being offended, as you kind of naturally are in the first few months, by people calling me Mr. Crawford. Because outside of an educational context, it just didn't matter to me. Then I got hired at Berkeley for a couple one-year gigs as faculty there. And of course, in my job as faculty there, I did ask to be called Dr. Crawford by my students, because I thought, well, this is an acknowledgement of my learning in the subject, and I don't have the title professor, and I never will, right? Professor is, the best way to put it to people who are outside of academia is professor is a rank, not a job description. So people who don't have that rank are not supposed to call themselves professor within the university. But in fact, that rank does not have a lot to do with teaching for the most part. In fact, often getting promoted to that rank means you're teaching way less. So most of the people who teach in a university today are untenured, right? They're not even on the track to getting promoted to the rank of professor. We get titles like instructor or lecturer or adjunct, and that's always what I was. So I could never call myself professor. Now students will call you professor because you teach in the classroom, because people outside of academia think a professor is a job description, not as a rank or a title. But of course I could never take that upon myself without, you know, probably someone tenured in the department running the pole of a stop sign through me. Anyway, so I took the title doctor among students, and while I was at Berkeley, in order to actually pay my bills, I started this YouTube channel, and originally promoting my books on it, but also then eventually putting the free content that I do on videos that I've been doing for the past 4 years on it. And I thought it was appropriate to introduce myself in these videos as Dr. Jackson Crawford. After all, the role is something analogous to a classroom, right? Most of my videos, believe it or not, yeah, you know, based on recent patterns, are not me rambling at the screen. It's me presenting about something that I have expertise in, whether talking about the history of the Old Norse language, or some, you know, Old Norse poem, or, you know, explaining how, you know, this Old Norse mythical concept works that way. And I thought, well, in this context, not only is using doctor appropriate, because I do have a PhD in this subject, but it also distinguishes me a little bit from all of the people talking about this online who don't have PhDs in this, right? As many competitors as I have, and as much attention as they get, they mostly don't have PhDs and are, you know, basing their information on something other than original research and years of full-time study of this subject. So I thought that was something special. You know, fast forward now to the end of 2020, the beginning of 2021, where there's all this controversy about it, and this notion, either gain in steam or gain in awareness, in my mind, that people who aren't medical doctors really oughtn't to use the title doctor. And it's something that's just calculated to really hit me, because I hate any notion that I could project the kind of academic pretentiousness that so many people within academia do, partially because I've been on the receiving end of that so often, right? I'm not culturally a very good fit with academia, especially with the tenured ranks of academia. I don't think that I'm smarter than most people. I don't think that I understand, everything about the world better because I have a Ph.D. in one narrow subject. I don't think that my Ph.D. entitles me to, just while away my decades publishing obscure papers and not contributing anything to wider society. I feel like I owe you, right, the people that that listen to me, I feel like I owe you the information that I have digested and can explain. I don't feel like you owe me reverence for having, still quite possibly wasted a decade of my life learning this stuff, right? If this YouTube channel falls through, just like teaching at universities did in a different way, I don't expect you to foot the bill, right? And if I have to go, work retail or change oil or something to make ends meet, and I've done that kind of thing before, that's on me and not on you. On me for taking the risk. And I'm not going to ask anybody to call me doctor when I'm sacking their groceries, right? I don't feel like it puts me in a different rank than other people, but I have so often been on the receiving end of it because I'm such a cultural mismatch. Just to look at the way that I dress, I guess people can tell that I'm not, to use a loaded term, one of the coastal elites. There's people in academia, this grad students that won't talk to me out of a notion that I'm like below them, right? Culturally, intellectually, whatever. And I guess it's just because of signals like that I'm barely conscious of. Who knows? So I've just never wanted to engage in that kind of like signaling of elite status. And I regret if my use of the title Dr. Jackson Crawford has ever projected that to you, because that was never what it was meant to do. It was meant to say, I have spent the time, I have paid my dues in this field, and I am trying to assure you that what I'm telling you has a certain security or safety, right? This isn't based on my wild ramblings. This isn't based on, some dream that I had in which I communed with the Norse gods or something. This is based on serious study. And major universities, in spite of the reservations of certain jackasses within them, have given me years in which to speak to huge classes about this stuff, and I still have great relationships with some people in these universities, including all my previous department chairs, which is kind of a mirabile dictu kind of thing. So going forward, I suppose that I've resolved that I'm gonna try to forget the doctor thing, and I'll still remind people when I can, and I think it's relevant, that I have a Ph.D. It's actually interesting how few people that reach out to me seem to be aware of that, because I always get this thing like, well, I heard from so-and-so who has a master's degree, and I'm like, you know that a PhD is a lot more work than that. No offense to people with masters, but it's like I've got a master's and a PhD, and I can tell you the PhD was a lot harder. I will continue to state as a fact that I have that credential, but I am very, very cautious and wary of saying, I'm better than you because of it, because I'm not. It's sort of arbitrary. I mean, there's so many occupations where you could have some kind of title to indicate your expertise. If there were a plumbing PhD and some convention of calling plumbers doctors for spending 8 years on working in plumbing, I'd be happy to call plumbers doctor, and I'm not making fun of plumbers. I'm saying that is a difficult field to master, and people who have a lot of mastery of it deserve recognition of whatever kind they ask, no less than someone who has mastered Old Norse, right? In fact, more than someone who's mastered Old Norse. So that's my thought. I am Jackson Crawford, Ph.D., but I don't insist on the doctor. Well, folks, from beautiful Colorado, I hope you've tolerated some more of my ramblings reasonably well. I appreciate your kindness, and especially appreciate all the Patreon supporters who have allowed me to make a living doing exactly this, going to beautiful places and talking to my phone. All the best from beautiful Colorado.